Hi everyone, I'm Carol Kelly, AVLI team member and instructor of AP Art History and Drama. In this video, we will be looking at curricular structures and assessment in the arts and how these relate to devising rubrics and assessments that can occur online. The video that follows provides a complete example of a lesson done online, the coordinating rubric and assessment, and the suggested online tool used in creation. First, we'll be taking a look at the foundational aspects of arts education. We'll pull from a variety of resources, from national standards for enduring knowledge in the arts to regional and local conceptual building blocks for arts education. And we'll see how backwards design, class assignments, and assessments can be handled in an online format. The good news about touching base with arts educators on foundational pedagogy, as I've learned in my 20+ years of teaching and working in the arts, is that arts instructors are, by profession and by personal design, open to new ideas, even as they retain the beauty and structure of the deeply rooted humanistic ideas about art and art making, both of which are vital to the moment in time in the education of our students that we find ourselves now. So let's talk about facilitating assessment in the arts and in online and hybrid formats. As I make this video, the world is grappling with paradigm shifts on every level. In another video, I'd mentioned that Father Kolvenbach's exhortation was that as teachers, we must let the gritty reality of the world into the lives of our students. That reality has not waited for an invitation. That is where I'd like to start with you, my colleagues. The times in which we find ourselves, I think, and I hope you'll agree, exemplify why the arts, in particular, are such an integral part of the education of the whole person. In my drama class, I've returned to Oedipus Rex to the curriculum so that my students and I can examine together Sophocles' ideas about moral leadership, context of contemporary events. And I'm working on building a unit where students will compare Gabriel Garcia Marquez's screenplay for Oedipus Mayor, which is set in the context of the guerrilla wars of contemporary Colombia, with the original text. The assessment piece, whether in class or whether online, will be to demonstrate pursuing character objectives. Of course, right now, and who knows in the fall, we find ourselves separated from our classrooms and from our students. But as we all know, art is going to get made out of whatever and wherever it finds itself. And autonomy in art making has a very impressive history. At the end, I'd like to share with you a video, for example, from St. Peter's Prep in Jersey City, where you'll get to see the works by student artists and get to see the studios where that gritty world will be examined, grief and joy expressed, and the human heart and mind explored. And no offense to our STEM colleagues, but explored in very extraordinary and personal ways. So let's take a quick overview of arts education in general and how at a distance teaching tools can be used to be an effective partner for all of us teaching in the arts. Edward Warburton in 2002 encouraged those using authentic arts assessments to not be limited to or focus solely on the final product or outcome. Warburton states that assessment in context includes not only genuine final products, but it also includes activities that are true to the making of the art form. He points out that playing scales on a piano is not an authentic product, but it is an authentic task in the musical training of pianists. Everyone knows this. So assessment in context includes both final products, such as portfolios or performances, as well as traditional pedagogical activities, such as playing scales, warm-ups, exercises, and the mixing of a palette. It's about process. Yes, there'll be a final form, but the pieces involved in getting there, the process, must take center stage in assessment. I love this quote by Michelangelo: "The art is there locked inside. All one must do is remove the excess stone." I like it because, of course, he made this, according to tradition, about the David. And what it's about is process, that it's about removing the excess stone, not the finished product, but that the art is already there. So looking at process is vital. And I'll just share with you one more of my favorite quotes that is supposedly attributed to Aristotle relative to form. That form is the significant arrangement of the parts, the part-to-part, and parts-to-the-whole relationships that together convey the artist's intent. He doesn't bury the lead, he puts artist intent at the end. And the parts and the part to heart and part to whole relationships, again, we're talking about process. And that's what I'd like to focus on in terms of putting together rubrics and assessment for online teaching of the arts. The techniques and the processes that go into making art are those that can be taught and learning that can be assessed in a variety of formats as students gain understanding about the relationship between form and content, with variables according to different artistic disciplines. So in terms of form, you have everything from inspiration, intuition, idea, perspective, context, design, technique, application, training, execution, review, revision, and execution again. This is the removing of the excess stone, and the relationship between the parts. This is how process links itself to the product. Processes in the arts involve performing and interpreting. Usually this is understood as performing an existing work, a process that calls on the student's interpretive, recreative skills. But creating, it includes many other things, and it shouldn't be limited to just the act of creating. It includes the expression of a student's unique and personal ideas, their feelings and responses in the form of a visual image, a character, a written or an improvised dramatic work, or the composition or the improvisation of a piece of music or dance. Typically, performing an existing work does not apply to the visual arts, where reproducing an artist's existing work is not central. However, it does suggest the engagement and motivation involved in creating a work of art. Responding includes many varieties, including an audience's members' response to a performance and the interactive response between a student and a particular medium. The response is usually a combination of affective, cognitive, and physical behavior. Responding involves a level of perceptual and observational skill, a description, an analysis, or an interpretation on the part of the respondent, and sometimes a judgment or evaluation based on criteria that may be self-constructed or commonly held by a group or a culture. Responding to art calls on higher order thinking, and it's central to the creative process. Although a response is usually thought of as a verbal, oral, or written response, it can and should be conveyed often non-verbally in art forms themselves. So you have this opportunity in teaching arts online to either engage students by having them show you work or by having them respond verbally to how they interpret or respond to other works of art made by other people. Major works of art in all traditions engage artists in a dialogue that crosses generations. Rubrics and assessments designed to allow students to demonstrate their ability to respond to art verbally are especially suited to online formats. So a little bit of arts education pedagogy. This is a framework matrix from Shreve, Waring, and Drew showing the key aspects of teaching and learning in the arts. The two major components of learning are expected of students who study the arts. Students should gain knowledge and understanding about the arts, including the personal, historical, cultural, and social contexts for works, and they should gain perceptual, technical, expressive, and intellectual and reflective skills. Both components are found in every arts discipline. Creative assessment strategies that allow students to exhibit technical skills, the ability to shade, for example, in drawing, the ability to lead a warm-up in a dance class, work very well with existing technologies online. In ensemble courses such as choir, assessing students' ability to sing repertoire passages is actually improved in an online format because students who enjoy singing in an ensemble often feel tremendous pressure, for example, when asked to sing aloud or alone in front of another person. That slight distance offered through an online demonstration of their ability is reported to help take the edge off their nerves somewhat. And you might even want to consider using that on an ongoing basis because of that reason. When students use the artistic processes of creating, performing, and responding, as you see them here in this framework matrix, they draw from various kinds of knowledge and understanding about the arts to construct the meaning that they will leave with. Students need to be able to place the arts in a broader context to fully appreciate their significance. We know this. So these contexts include a personal perspective and understanding of how the arts fit into the student's immediate society and broader culture, and historical perspective. Students need knowledge of aesthetics to understand varied concepts and philosophies of the nature, meaning, and intrinsic value of the arts that people from different cultures and periods have formulated and held. Students also need to know about and understand the different forms of expression, the structure of each, and the various technical processes by which art forms can be created. And it's those technical processes that facilitate themselves to being assessed and assessed online, and for which rubrics can be created most easily. I like this framework because it provides a general vision for the 4 arts major disciplines and the flexibility to accommodate differences between them. Each discipline fits into the grand scheme of the framework, preserving the distinguishing characteristics of each medium. So that you see the requisite qualities of arts assessment in the performing arts include creating, performing, and responding. And the requisite qualities of arts assessment in the visual arts include creating and responding. So now let's take a look at how backwards design for arts assessment works together with this framework matrix in terms of conceiving rubrics and designing appropriate assessments for arts education students. So I've synthesized some of the backwards design in arts education concepts across our network and compared them to some national and local and regional standards, and I'll share them with you now. Students in arts education programs, in terms of analysis, what are the overall expectations? They could be these. By the end of the course, the students will apply a framework of critical analysis to their own and acknowledged artworks through participation in a variety of art viewing strategies, explain through critical analysis the function of their own artworks and those of other cultures, and demonstrate an understanding of connections between art and cultural identity or context. So as always with backwards design, it starts with a series of questions, and when the student can answer these questions, then the enduring knowledge has been attained. And I think you can really see as I go through these questions in all of these categories how they translate themselves rather easily to defining rubrics and to creating assessment strategies to find out if the students can in fact answer the questions and if the enduring knowledge has been attained. So the enduring understanding in terms of analysis, students will be able to identify the elements and principles of design in a piece of art. The essential questions for this would be, at the outset, do you like the work of art? Why or why not? Does it have artistic merit? Can I appreciate the design elements of a variety of works of art, even if I don't like the art? How do the elements and principles help create a meaningful piece of art? And what cultural influences have affected the artist or artwork? In terms of creation, backwards design concepts and overall expectations might be these. By the end of this course, students will use materials and processes to create art objects that express their intent and/or that contribute to the expressive intent of the original artist, i.e. composer, choreographer, playwright, etc. Apply the elements and principles of the art form. Produce or perform art using a variety of techniques, instruments, concepts, materials, tools, processes, and technologies. Apply the creation process, perception, exploration, experimentation, production, and evaluation. Explain the function of research in the art form. I think you can, in the creation especially, you can really see the echoed, or I guess here, mix my metaphors, the echoed words of Michelangelo, removing that excess stone, and also the words of Aristotle, the part-to-part and part-to-whole relationships that together are going to convey the artist's intent. The enduring understanding in the creation of art is that students will be able to express themselves through visual creation, performance, etc. The essential questions that are set forth at the beginning that the students will be able to answer by the end of the unit or the semester is, how do I use the elements and principles of my art form to design, create, and/or perform effective artworks? How can I use my art form to effectively communicate my ideas and/or the expressive ideas of the art to others? How can I apply the creative process beyond my art form? And finally, backwards design in arts education as it relates to theory. Overall expectations being these. By the end of this course, students will apply an understanding of the elements and principles of design to personal, historical, and contemporary artworks, differentiate artworks by period, style, method, and materials, demonstrate knowledge of a particular period in the history of the art form, and demonstrate an understanding of the professional options available to them in the art form. And I particularly like that last one because I'm always a big proponent of interdisciplinary collaboration. And I think you can see through this concept of backwards design in theory in terms of the arts how interdisciplinary collaboration would be particularly effective in pairing your course with that of another teacher's. The enduring understanding in theory is that students will understand the elements and principles of the art form and will utilize this understanding in the development of their worldview, the cosmology piece, as I call it. And this is particularly important in teaching to the whole person. The essential questions then: what makes a work of art compelling? What makes me respond to a work of art? When I experience the forms of the artistic discipline, can I see how the elements and principles of the process have been applied? What makes art enduring? How is art a reflection of its time? And how is art able to bridge spans of time and geographical location? How is art relevant in my life? Of course, all of us that teach in the arts know that the arts are unique in terms of assessment. So I've tried to find resources that are really clear on this, and I think I have hit on one that makes a lot of sense to me about the unique aspects of arts assessment. Doing and making are critical components of arts education. Arts knowledge is accessible, and so is the process of making art as well as the artwork itself. Each of these components, knowledge, process, and production, is intertwined, and each needs to be represented and accounted for in the assessment system. Arts education assessment is authentic. It examines students' work much like real-world work is assessed. While pencil and paper testing may have a role, much of arts assessment is based on more complex and in-depth examinations of student work. Strategies that accomplish authentic assessment include portfolios, personal reflection, and critique. I think this provides a picture of an opportunity to assess our students where they are not just performing at the end of the school term, but rather they are considering all along the evolution of themselves as artists. So we know that in today's world, Zoom is either lauded as being the best solution to everything or getting a bad rap because we all seem to be on it all day. But actually, it can play a really important role, not just Zoom, but any system like it, in terms of arts education and assessment. We know in the arts that students learn through engaging in activities that are either fully authentic examples of replicas of those undertaken by practitioners in the field of their art form, and consequently then they can recognize themselves and be recognized by the arts community as juniors, but legitimate members of the arts community. This from Shreve, Waring, and Drew. Part of, as Laven Wagner described, as legitimate peripheral participation in a community of practice. I'll repeat that. Legitimate peripheral participation in a community of practice. In other words, meeting with other artists online. Assessment in the arts is accomplished through presentation and examination of a collection of the student work that provides evidence of process, research, rehearsal, technique, drawings, artifacts, samples, sketches, thoughts, developmental ideas, and finished products or recordings of performances. All of these are included and can be done online. Evidence of the product, the process, and the learning outcomes that you've established for them can be shown online. Peer critics are particularly helpful and can be easily facilitated online and actually work really well online because they can be anonymous. Social learning provides opportunity for students to understand assessment practices really helpfully. So how would that work? Well, if you have an online management system, you can sort and manage the students into groups. Easily done. You can enable students to input marks and feedback comments on themselves and others that will allow for multiple formative assessments. You can enable students to view graphs that depict their development over the duration of a project. You can make peer feedback available to students. Again, it could be anonymous, and you can incorporate things like color-coded systems to point out potential marking discrepancies and that will aid in moderation and that are somewhat gentler and more nuanced sometimes than a group of peers speaking out loud about another person's art. And you can support generating and retrieving feedback from every peer assessment. Something that's very interesting is that students oftentimes say that they learn very little in peer critiques, for example, in drafting classes, in school environments, and that's because they're so nervous waiting for their critique that they don't listen to the critique of others. That is actually solved in a lot of ways online because you can go back and you can listen to what happened before, even if you missed it the first time around. So let's just go through some requisite qualities of arts assessment in general, and these apply to whether you're having arts assessment in class, whether you're trying to do it hybrid, whether you're trying to do it online. They're very consistent. So always clearly communicated expectations for excellence, that you expect excellence and that these expectations are communicated clearly is a requisite quality of arts assessment. Opportunities for ongoing and active self-assessment is a requisite quality of arts assessment. An ongoing process of assessment that includes multiple types of formative and summative in a cyclical fashion is another requisite quality of arts assessment. This cyclical fashion includes the process of creation, analysis, revision, peer and instructor review. In terms of the explicit objective criteria for process, formative assessment strategies provide guidance. They provide a checklist for skill development and application, and they provide an opportunity to reflection. The explicit expectation for outcomes that include high standards for excellence for summative assessment strategies are: they should challenge students, they should show clear relevance to the art form in the real world, they should be analogous to the artistic process of the respective discipline, they should include exemplars of expected excellence, they should allow for peer, self, and instructor critique, and they should provide opportunity for revision. I hope you're seeing that in almost every case I've included opportunity for revision. That's so necessary to the artistic process. And I'm going to underscore that with this, that the freedom to fail as process evolves to product is a necessary requisite quality of arts assessment. Artists make art, artists assess art, artists revise, and artists make art again. And this applies to every artistic discipline in every form. And then finally, the opportunity to discuss the relationship between form and content as it applies to their work as an artist. And this goes all the way back to what we said at the very beginning. And this opportunity to discuss is really important and actually can be facilitated again in online formats. So what I'd like to do in this last part of the video is just to show you some brief examples of standards for rubrics and assessments that have been winnowed through this backwards design process and the formatted matrix that you saw earlier. And then we'll end with a quick example, and then there's a follow-up video that provides a complete example, as I say, of a lesson online. So in terms of form and content and the ability of a student to respond to art, you'll see that in this generalized slide, standards for rubrics would be consistent across all art forms, and I draw your attention in particular to the relationships between form and context, form and meaning or function, and critical and analytical models through understanding of the works of art and historians. So you can see how these pieces fit together in terms of responding to the art, and I think you can start to see, or start to brainstorm, if you will, questions that you can ask of your students that would allow them to exhibit that they had gained this enduring knowledge. Specific examples, of course, in terms of process are going to be relevant to your respective art form. So a few examples on that. In terms of creating, let's say in a music class, to demonstrate skill and expressiveness in the choice and use of musical elements, to evaluate, refine, and revise successive versions of an original work. In terms of performing, to be able to read musical notation accurately, to evaluate, refine, and revise the performance. To read musical notation accurately, I think you can certainly see how you could do that online. You would have an opportunity to provide them with something that they would have to read, even in a sight-singing sense, and they would have to read that notation accurately. What about our art processes for the visual arts in terms of creating? Well, certainly form, media, techniques, and processes to achieve goodness of fit with the intended meaning or function of the art, preliminary or formative ideas, sketches, models before final execution, relationships between process and product, personal direction and application of concepts learned to daily life. All of these things offer opportunities to really engage with a student in what we spoke about before, which is artists being, if you will, junior members, but definitely members of the arts community with the ability to discuss their art and the processes that they have gone through to create their art. And then art processes for theater. To develop scripts and scenarios, actually, I've done a 2-minute marathon online with my students. They write 2-minute plays. That has been really effective. Develop characters through an acting process. They can make design and technical choices to communicate locale. This would be for tech theater. To direct by interpreting dramatic text or organizing time. Of course, that obviously, like most performing arts, is better facilitated in an ensemble, but there are opportunities to organize microcosms of that, if you will, in online interaction. This slide provides an opportunity to see how responding will work in theater, but there are very similar approaches in all artistic disciplines, especially in the performing arts, but also in visual arts. Responding in order to describe and analyze the artistic choices in their own work and construct meaning from them, and to describe and compare elements, styles, genre, media, and dramatic literature, and then to place these things in context through personal, social, historical, and cultural contexts. All of that being part of responding to the art, and all of it pertaining to that enduring knowledge and those questions that we spoke about in terms of backwards design. Again, this template is from the theater, but actually it's the same for all of the artistic disciplines. It just has theater there at the top. But it breaks it down in terms of the knowledge and skills on either side, and shows you that in terms of knowledge, students apply their knowledge to context, personal, social, cultural, historical, their knowledge in terms of aesthetics, their knowledge in terms of form and structure, and their knowledge in terms of the processes of making art. And then in terms of skills, students apply cognitive, affective, and motor skills that include perceptual, intellectual, reflective, expressive, and technical. So what about examples for implementation in terms of designing a unit, let's say, and creating a rubric and creating an exercise for your students, and then having an assessment for at the end of the unit or the end of a week, for example. I have an example that you can watch in a follow-up video that is the entire lesson, but I will show you briefly now one example for that. And this example happens to be, as I say, a music example for the fall semester, the first week orchestra student lesson. And this teacher is anticipating actually not being in their building the first week. So she has designed a first week for her orchestra students and what she is hoping to have them learn in that first week. This is how the teacher has used backwards design in terms of the creation aspect, and I have here in yellow the activities that take place underneath the overall expectations. So in terms of use of materials and processes, this teacher is going to have their students to have proper tuning in anticipation of playing in an ensemble. In terms of applying the elements and principles of the art form, this teacher is using introduction to string structure and sound generation waves, and this consummate knowledge of the art form. In terms of producing or performing art using a variety of techniques, etc., this teacher has their students tuning bridge perspective, parts of an instrument, and relationship to tuning and playing will be gained in terms of what the students will learn. And then applying the creation process, the first objective step in the process of playing, exploration, and auditory experimentation and awareness. And all of this sounds very lofty, but it comes from the correct application of tuning their instrument and those first building blocks at the beginning of an orchestra course at the first part of a semester. So I hope you will watch the follow-up video where the teacher teaches the whole lesson on how to tune an instrument. But I just wanted to share with you how specific that rubric was. So the video shows the teacher showing students how to tune their instrument, and then this is the rubric that she would give them in advance in terms of the end of the week. They would show her that they had gained the knowledge and the practice of how to tune their instrument. So the tuning assessment involved is this. Are your strings in tune? She gives 12 points for 4 strings, 3 possible points for each student, and she talks about hertz in this because in the demonstration video she shows students how to use a particular kind of tool to tune their instrument that focuses on the hertz and the sound waves and the variation of sound waves. In terms of the questions that she's going to ask them, and also getting certain points for certain questions. What are the hertz? What material can you apply to your pegs to smooth their rotation if they're sticking? How can you tell if your bridge is in the right position? And why is it important to tune your instrument daily? You can see built into this that this teacher is building up to that long-term concept of responding to the arts and also contextualizing the arts in terms of their place as an artist in that artistic discipline and the eventuality of, in this case, returning to an ensemble and having this piece of the puzzle in place when they get there. And then in terms of extra credit, what are some other ways to tune? So what would be analogous in the other art forms? And I'm just going to include a few brief examples, and then we'll make these available in a PDF, as all of the demonstrations are and all of the learning tools are at AVLI. But for example, let's say it's choir. How could a similar exercise take place in terms of assessment? Sight singing, read unfamiliar pieces from notation is a possibility. Read whole, half, dotted, half quarter notes. All of these things are easily facilitated in terms of creating simple, interactive video assessments online with your students. In the visual arts, what are some just brief examples? And again, we'll have these available just to call your attention to a couple, though. Demonstrate knowledge of the difference between materials, techniques, and processes. I've seen this done, and students, even outside of their building, have collected a wide variety of art-making materials that they have used to display their knowledge of this. To provide reasons for specific selections and explain means for giving visual form to content. This is that relationship between form and content, and having a student have the opportunity to explain why they have selected different tools or techniques in terms of communicating what they had hoped to communicate through their art. The last slide in visual arts showed you arts at grade 4, and you saw the basic components of it. And you'll see in this next one a slightly more sophisticated look in terms of assessment. Now we're integrating visual, spatial, and temporal concepts with content to communicate intended meaning in their artworks. So you want to be thinking as you're designing, of course, assessment, how to build on what the students may have learned before and how to add to those components and increase that enduring knowledge based on age range. And then finally, here we would have grade 12 in terms of the visual arts, and I would draw your attention in particular to number 4, create multiple solutions to specific visual arts problems that demonstrate competence in producing effective relationships between structural choices and artistic functions. Man, and that is all process related and all provided an opportunity to provide and to exhibit that in an online format. Now, while you may not be with your student in a studio, you certainly would have an opportunity for the student to be able to look at these multiple solutions in an online or a distance format. And then finally, theater, and I've chosen technical theater in this case, in terms of creating or performing, the opportunity to select music and sound effects to convey environments that clearly support the text. This is a great opportunity for students to be exploring on their own as they try to pair, again, form and content and try to serve that theme in the part-to-part and part-to-whole relationships that make up theater, that make up the theater ensemble. Or to design coherent stage management, promotional or business plans. This is really important. Some students are interested in dramaturgy, some students are interested in set design in terms of creating a ground plan. So there's a fairly wide variety in terms of how students can exhibit the knowledge that they've gained in terms of creating and performing in theater, in this case in technical theater. So where can you go to get even more ideas? Well, I'm going to connect you with this resource. The Annenberg Workshop for Arts Teachers by Grade Levels is really helpful. They just have a wide variety of materials that you can look into, and they have some workshops that you can look at, and if nothing else, you get great ideas, but they also have some practical tools that you'll be able to access in addition to the overview that I've shown you here. And then finally, I wanted to close with a short piece. I don't have a title for this, but I'm going to tell you what the title is. And it's artists who are self-taught. And I think that's something that we all want to remember. It's the making of art is so compulsory to the person who gravitates to the arts. And I know we feel like we want to be with our students at every moment, but I think we want to take heart in the fact that they will make art in any case. And here are just a short list, a very short list of artists that are self-taught. Mostly self-taught and some entirely self-taught. Jean-Michel Basquiat, Henri Rousseau, Bill Traylor, Thornton Dial, and that is his image there on the right of the fire at Corncob Mine. Thelonious Monk, Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, Louis Armstrong, George Philip Telemann, Toru Takemitsu, August Wilson, Maxim Gorky, Tadao Ando, and Frederick Law Olmsted, who I am going to show you at the very last because I miss my New York and I don't know when I'll get back. When Frederick Law Olmsted sent his design to competition when they were building Central Park, he had never designed anything like it, and he wasn't a designer at all. And he conceived in his imagination landscapes and vistas that would change as you made your way through the park, through this incredible park. So take heart, work on assessments and rubrics that make sense in online formats, watch the subsequent video of the great music teacher doing a tutorial, and look at her rubric once more, but also know that your students will make art and they will communicate with you and you will be linked together online, and so will we. Please let us know how we can help at AVLI, and thank you so much for watching. Bye.